So, silencing the squeaks, practical solutions for piano noise reduction. So, first question, what is noise? Does anybody have some ideas? Just a general description. Yes.
Anything that's not supposed to be there.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Yes, sir.
Absence of silence.
Absence of silence, yes. That's very good. I like that.
Vibration.
Vibration, yes. All right, so the definition I came up with, at least in regards to pianos, what we're dealing with here today is just any non-musical sound. And what are some words to describe noise? Annoying.
A thud.
Annoying. A thump, did I hear?
Thud.
A thud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Squeak, rattle, whine,
Groan.
groan,
Stupid.
stupid,
Good job,
annoying. Did you already said something? You said annoying.
What buzz?
Buzz, yeah.
Scrape.
Scrape, yeah, that's a good one. So I came up with some synonyms. I'm sure we've heard a lot of these before, I'm sure. And I guess I would say too, after a while, I'm sure for a lot of you, these noises, they become almost second nature. But the way customers describe them can just be all over the map.
Could be in their head too.
It could be.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, types of noise. These are just for categorization purposes. I came up with 3 basic categories. So a squeak, friction between moving parts. Squeak generally calls for some sort of lubrication. And a buzz is a continuous vibration between loose parts, by my definition anyways. A click is a one-time impact of loose parts.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Now we're setting the stage for diagnosis. So just some basics before we get into what's actually going on inside the piano. First, we have to determine, is the noise actually coming from inside or outside the piano? Is anything touching the piano? Could it be something in the room?
We had a good story about that last month. I think that was from.
Baseboard.
Yeah, the one that was baseboard. Yeah, it was
Yes,
your
there was
story.
a baseboard. I think I recall also a snare drum
Oh, yeah.
incident. Was that, yeah? And sometimes some of these we might not, as piano technicians, be able to do anything about, other than point it out to the customer that it's not actually coming from the piano. If it's something in their house, it may be up to them to deal with that, but at least they know it's not the piano. Just some tips. I always like to listen to the piano with the case, like when I first sit down to it, before I even start tuning it. I like to take everything off, and then I just play a few chords, just listen for some potential noises. And then if there's anything obvious, I like to try and address that. I call it the circle of refinement, and this applies to not only noises, but also a lot of aspects of piano technology. At least in field service, you're trying to address the worst problem first.
You're doing triage.
Yes, yes. And I would point out too that sometimes these noises are as important as tuning. Especially if you're in a recording situation, for example. That's just one, oh, thank you. One example that comes to mind. Okay, now we get into a few videos. This I'm calling the piano rattle montage. Infamous clicking filament in the light.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Loose
God.
mirror. Loose window pane. These, I'm sorry if these maybe aren't all coming across very well in this audio, but these were all very distinctive when I was there tuning.
Wow.
And again, you get very intuitive at locating where the noise is coming from by playing different volumes, turning your head.
Wow.
I think my best find so far is it was a mirror across the room that I was able to zone. I'm very proud. I was able to zone in very quickly.
That's so funny.
Okay, some more pictures. We're still setting the stage here. You can see a little paper clip, very common.
The famous.
Pencil, very common. Clicking away. This one's buzzing away. There's the light, and here's everyone's favorite metronome. These are notorious for rattling. So basically anything loose on the piano. And then here's our customer.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Go ahead.
So I think this is the most loaded piano I've ever come across.
Poor thing.
So,
What was that like here?
everything. So, yeah. And I will say some piano professors' pianos look almost like this, but with music books.
Everywhere.
Okay.
I would be guilty.
Oh, and I'll just mention a few things as far as around pianos. We had loose baseboards, snare drums, heating grates are very common. And also check humidity control system components. I had one the other day. It was the humidistat, the two screws holding the humidistat into the beam. I had over time just worked their way out to be a little bit loose, causing a very distinct rattle. I had the customer play it and I crawled under the piano.
Wow.
I found that as the source. Microphone components. Here's just an example of that. Another customer complaint. They didn't know what it could possibly be. So I ended up, all we did was I put this microfiber cloth here underneath, and that took care of it. But obviously any cords touching strings are going to cause noise. Things that seem very obvious to piano technicians may or may not be obvious to piano owners. It's a very nice feeling to solve a buzz too. It's a nice sense of satisfaction. And now cleaning. We're still in the setting the stage area here. Cleaning is very important. Mostly just to get rid of all the foreign objects inside a piano. Oh, I did want to show these little mirrors are very handy. I got this at Harbor Freight. I think it was like $5 for looking under the plate. In the holes there, you can take a little flashlight and shine it around. Find just all sorts of odds and ends. Very handy. Some other things, coins underneath pianos. Kids, in my experience, like to hide things under pianos just for whatever reason. And objects that are falling behind or under the piano. For upright pianos, it's very common for things to fall in between the back, the beam, and the soundboard, to be sitting underneath that little ledge in there. Most piano owners don't move their piano out away from the wall to clean it. So if you get the chance, it's nice to run a vacuum back there every once in a while if you can. Okay, so now we're on to actual case parts of the piano. And so again, just some very common, these music desks, these decorative desks are just a pain. All sorts of different kinds. I still don't have the greatest solution for that. I've been so frustrated in the past, I've just taken these parts off with the owner's permission. Or if it's a piano in a practice room where there's not really technically a private owner and I'm just trying to get it to sound a little more reasonable to reduce the noise. A piano like this should really never be at a university anyways, but some of these pianos just end up everywhere. The lid latch or catch, just any screws in the case basically can cause rattles. These little brass plates can rattle. And again, these are all just in the last 6 months. I'm sure there are many more. These are just some, basically every time I heard something, I snapped a quick picture or I took a quick video. And again, a lot of these are very basic. It's not rocket science here or anything. And here's a Kawai music desk. And I just wanted to show underneath how many screws there are on this.
Oh, wow,
And this is at a high school. I'm sure the humidity gets well below 20%, so pretty much all the screws are loose everywhere, not only in the case, but everywhere. And then I'll also mention some additional things, trucks, dollies, all potential for noise, all the loose screws. The sound vibrates everywhere in a piano, down through the legs, into the casters, into the truck. Suspended casters are a big one for the little consoles. I have a picture of that coming up. And here's a good one. And this one I actually got from David Reed. He's with Kauai. I took his buzz, I forget what the title of the class was, but this last summer at the National Convention. And it's on a grand piano, the leg bolt washers.
Oh.
So if the bolt is a little bit loose, you can have a little bit of a lot of them have the washers. So that's just another potential.
Wow.
I thought that was a good one. And here again, Kauai, this is a stretcher lock. These I've also just completely taken out, and it's right in the musician's face.
Yeah.
So very prone to rattles. And I actually called David Reed way back about a similar situation where there was a rattle. And at the time, he suggested putting cotton balls and stuffing it down in there. This past summer, he talked about the idea of using white glue and lining the edges with just a little bit of glue just to take up the space, just as a way to potentially solve that. Again, it's anywhere there's a space in there with the vibration, you have two pieces that are basically moving against each other, creating noise. Yeah. This one has two problems. It's both those grates, and then also the music desk is hitting the edge there. Just to show you, that would be my kind of solution. I wouldn't leave that there, but I guess what you could do is put a little rubber button on the back where there's contact between the music desk and the overhang there, or a piece of leather, just something so it's not sitting right up against it. And again, this I would not have noticed if I had just taken it apart, tuned the piano, everything sounds fine, put it back together, not tested it. It would be very easy to miss this sort of thing. Again, that's a reason I like to listen to the piano with the case parts on, both before and after I tune the piano. And I guess I'll mention too, I'm a field technician, so I'm doing most of my work in the field. Some of these repairs that I'm showing here, they may be a little bit improvised, but sometimes we do what we have to do. Here's another example. These Everett's, the little locks.
Oh, wow.
Again, I've taken those right out. I've also just taken some crazy glue and dropped that in there. It kind of renders the lock useless, but I consider that a little bit of a design fault in my opinion. Oh, here's one that I'm sure a lot of people have seen before.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Wow.
So it was fun. And then there's usually a little pin there that you can tap that back, or you can wedge a piece of wood in there, anything to get that solid on there. And then here's the suspended caster I was talking about. Those are notorious for rattling.
Lovely.
If you install that dolly, just take those off. They just pull right out. So you take a screwdriver, just pop those out, or you can just unscrew them and then give them to the piano owner, or put them in the bench.
Don't rattle in the bench too.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, it's true. Oh, here's another comment. That lid prop. So it's both the hinge
Wow.
and also the short stick on the long stick. There's usually a piece of rubber, like a rubber button, between the short stick and the long stick. So you can, that gets hard with age. You can put a fresh piece on there, a soft rubber. Now if it's in the hinge itself, a few ideas on that. Of course you want to make sure that all these screws are tight. But then also that hinge pin itself can be rattling inside the hinge. a few ideas with that. I've tried bending them. I haven't had a lot of luck with that. I think Mario Egret,
Yeah.
is that his
That's
book?
his book, yeah.
He recommends cork grease.
Oh, I could see.
Or so you could slather that theoretically with something. Basically, you're trying to fill that gap in there.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting idea. I think, again, David Reed, he mentioned linseed oil. Has anybody heard of that concept?
I've heard of linseed oil, not.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what it actually is. I'm assuming, is it maybe a thicker sort of,
It's like a furnace
It's kind of like a mineral oil consistency.
It's very,
So it's very thin.
strong, too.
okay, maybe he was referring then to, if a hinge squeaks, that's one thing. And then you can put maybe just any kind, you can even put Protec in there. And I'll go over all these lubricants to get rid of a squeak. But if you're trying to actually fill the gap, then maybe something like cork grease or any kind of grease. Just an idea.
I carry a selection of pins in case, like, sometimes if the pin is missing, I might have one that fits it, or maybe that pin is too small or something.
Yes, that's definitely, if it's an ill-fitting pin. What I found, I think in this situation, at least the pins that I had, the next size up was too big for the hole. And I guess that's another thing you could theoretically do, is you'd have to disassemble it, pull the pin out, but you could take some pliers and actually squish that hinge to make the hole smaller,
Especially if it's brass.
if it's brass, yeah. I don't know if that's advisable or not, if you're weakening the brass, but just a thought.
With the linseed oils, particularly if you're using a boiled variety, be careful with disposal.
He did mention that, thank you for that, yes. He said something about putting the tissue, not putting it in the garbage can because that.
Do not.
They'll
Leave it
go on
out flat
fire.
and wait for it to dry.
Thank you,
If you
yes.
wad it up and you leave it, it can actually spontaneously combust.
Okay, thank
There's
you.
the thing.
Yes.
That was it.
That's bad.
And I guess maybe some other common things, all the rubber buttons can get hard on the case. Trying to think of anything else. Okay, well, let's move on to screws. Anybody like to venture a guess as to how many screws are in a piano?
Do you have an actual number? That's so cool.
I'll say 300.
Okay, 300, just like the price is
Oh,
right.
yeah.
I have a number in mind. I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but it's a number that I use. I'll say 300 is a little low.
I'll say no, not that.
Can't go over.
Okay. I don't know, 350.
50. So I say 400. That's counting all the flanges.
Okay.
I won't go through all the screws, all the case screws, damper screws, etc., etc. And any one of them can be loose and cause a click or a rattle or a buzz. I guess one thing I mentioned just about action screws, one thing that's helpful as far as diagnosing is whether the noise is on the attack or if it's on the release. Some of you may have heard this. If it's on the attack, chances are it's a hammer flange, or at least that's the first place I check. If it's on the release, there's a good chance it's the whip-in flange, and hopefully you're not dealing with the spin-it, because nobody wants to take a spin-it action out to tighten the whip-in screws. But in general, I think it's a good practice to get into, especially if you have the action out, if you're doing some other sort of repair. Just take 5-10 minutes, quickly go through and snug those up. Again, in Michigan, just over time, the screws get loose. And here's just another example. Sideways.
Oh,
So it's hard to tune, but there's also a lot of clacking you can hear. Just to give you a visual, I know you all know what tightening a screw looks like, but and there I'm just pushing it, and you can hear it clack when it hits against the hammer rail. I was going in and tightening it, and it's so much quieter.
oh my God.
Now here's just an after. Again, just, I don't know if that took me 10 minutes, probably 7-8 minutes. That's still out of tune. And here's just a little playing. And like Jim said, you're getting rid of I forget how he worded it exactly, but the idea of silence, that noise in there, it just obscures the tone. It does not need, it shouldn't be there. Right there, I think I'm looking at a picture frame that's probably also buzzing, but let's move on. In my notes here, I have tightening screws is one of the biggest bang for the buck, at least getting rid of noise, except for a spinet. Okay, now lid hinges. What I want to do here, and this tip I actually got from you, Jim, for how to fix screw holes, loose screw holes, how to fix 3 methods. And so what I just want to point out, if you are going to use toothpicks, use the round kind, not the flat ones. And if you've ever shopped for toothpicks, I'll just hand out a couple of these. These are the round ones. They just tend to fill the gap a little better. Just some wood glue. And also just a side note, you may want to avoid using the term toothpick in front of a customer with a high-end piano. Don't ask me how I know. Some people are sensitive.
Yeah.
What's that? Yep.
Small gauge dowel.
Yes, or wood dowel, wood shim. Woodworkers don't care, it's a piece of wood, but piano owners, again, can be sensitive in ways that we don't anticipate. She neglected to have me do the repair. It was a Steinway.
Oh my God. He's like,
And I think I forever lost favor in her eyes, so,
thanks.
you know, little things that, they make a difference.
I can imagine her telling her friends, oh, he could put your toothpick in the
Well, and let me just go over a few of these other. Steel wool and crazy glue. I found that to be a good one for the fallboard knobs. Sometimes those holes they're short and they can be hard to fill with toothpicks. The best repair would be a wood plug as far as fixing strip screw holes, like for casters or lid hinges. Okay, pedal noise. Now we're getting into some of the good stuff. This is one of the most common complaints, and it's just a highly used part of the piano, so of course over time it's going to develop problems. Well, that being said, even brand new pianos can have pedal squeaks for different reasons, and I'll get into that a little bit. So a few just basic things. Can everybody see my little pointer here?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if again, this is my first time with the PowerPoint, so I hope the
That's great.
fonts are all readable and all that.
They're cool.
It looks good.
So, thank you. So tight pedal brackets, that's these things down here. Mind you, there can be all sorts of stuff going on inside there as well. And I'll get into that as well, but just some basic things here. Also, while I have this picture out, these action brackets, you can see how they're sitting on this post here. Sometimes, if that's not seated properly, when you press the pedal, it shifts the action and you can get a noise or a bit of a click or a clunk in that exact area. Those are usually just screwed in. You can take a wrench and just back that out just slightly so it's seated properly. And you test that then by pressing the pedal to see if the noise goes away. That's one potential. Another kind of an oddball situation, the pedal can hit the floor to cause a noise.
Yeah.
If you're missing felt underneath here, or sometimes there's a piece of wood with a piece of felt glued on. If that's missing, that's a definite, an obvious source, so you just glue a new piece of felt under there or a piece of wood and felt, whatever it needs, to make sure there's clearance between the pedal and the floor. And then another kind of an unusual one, and I'll show you some more videos of this later, but this whole bottom piece here can flex. And so it can cause noise in a few spots. It can be actually the screws themselves that are squeaking in the wood. It's not always possible at a customer's home to turn the piano on its back and tighten them. If you have the piano on its back, tightening them is very easy. If you don't, something I've found that works is just carry these offset screwdrivers. I'll pass these around, both in Phillips and the flat. And especially the ones right around the pedal, those can work themselves loose. And then another problem that can be caused by the bottom flexing is that all these points, these pins here that hold the knee board in place, and this spring up here that it clips back in, those can all be sources where when you're pressing the pedal, that there's just a little spot of friction there. I find Teflon works great for that. On basically all wood, metal, or plastic. I love Teflon. Oh, and let's see, I'm tightening all of these. I'm calling these pieces here trap work. I don't know if that's the official word. I know in a grand piano it's referred to as trap work. I'm going to call that the upright trap work. Those are all held by springs and screws both into the bottom and into the wood itself, all points of friction. It's very difficult to get access to those offset screwdrivers, come in handy. Worst case scenario, you could squirt some Protec in there. Again, I don't know if that's the best solution. It's at least a temporary solution. And it also helps with isolating the noise. If it keeps recurring, you may have to do something a little more substantial than that.
Andrew,
Yes.
if you said it, I missed it, I'm sorry. Is that, where would you get your hands on a specialty tool like that?
These,
Is that like a shaft thing, or is that a special hardware store?
these, I'm pretty sure actually I found these at, I mean, worst case scenario, you can find anything on Amazon. But I'm pretty sure I found these at just a standard local. My go-tos are Ace, Lowe's, Home Depot. I guess of one of those three, I'm pretty sure. The shaft as well.
I haven't looked lately, but they used to. That's where
Okay.
I got mine.
Okay.
The one that we have actually has a double. It has a Phillips on one end and a flat on the other. It's both.
And actually what I like about this is that it has, so these are both flat, but they're at a different orientation to the handle.
Oh,
This one is parallel, this one's at 90 degrees. So it's, again, it's very helpful in those awkward situations where you can't get the handle in the right position, you just switch it over.
oh wow. I
So
have
these
all.
are,
And I think I saw that's a number, like a number 1 and a number 2 point.
thank you, yeah, it's a small and then this is a large, a 1 or 2 or whatever it is, yeah. Yeah. Okay, now here's, and this, okay, this I'll just mention, this is a brand new Boston upright, less than a year old. I'm at a school district, we just got 12 of these, and basically they're all starting to do this, so I had to come up with a quick way to solve the problem.
I can't stand that sound. Oh my gosh, it's the worst.
Is that enough torture?
Oh,
So
every
now
time.
it's heavy action out and on its back. I'm taking Teflon powder here and just using a felt mute. I'm being very liberal with it. I'm just basically lubricating both the spoon, the damper rod that goes in behind there, and also the damper lever felt. Of those three things, there's something in this particular design that's susceptible to making noise. I don't know if there's more friction for some reason, or if it's the type of felt they use, or if it's something in the metal, or all three. And this, from start to finish, to take the action out, to go through and lubricate that, put the action back in, it's about 10 minutes.
How long does it last, the Teflon?
That's a good question. One thing I like about Teflon is that it works into the felt fibers. And I like using it on wood for that same reason, and on leather, because it almost becomes a part of the material itself. So with any luck, I'm hoping this lasts, I don't know yet. I only did this, again, this is within the last 6 months. But I like Teflon. I get nervous sometimes, and maybe this is unwarranted, but using some of the liquid lubricants on felt. I know they say you can, but in my mind, there's the potential that once that dries out, it can potentially harden the felt. I don't know if it can attract dust, maybe that's more of the grease type stuff. I would never use anything like grease in here. That just messes the whole thing up. Or anything heavy. You could almost do no wrong with that. You can't apply too much of it. Anywhere it lands, it's going to be a benefit to the piano, in my opinion.
Okay.
So I really like Teflon.
When you have that picture up, there's one other thing that has often happened. I can't remember if it's a Wurlitzer or a Baldwin, but there's a one dummy damper spring.
Yes,
Just at the top of the tenor section.
yes, kind of right in the middle there.
Yeah.
Yes,
There's no damper on it, but there's a spring on it, and that often.
that's a very good point.
Wow.
Paul mentioned that as well. That's something I actually forgot about. That is one of the more common squeaks. Not all models have that. But yes, and I think that is designed just to help it return or put some back pressure on that damper on, but very common, yes.
Wow.
And that, again, for all spring slots, Teflon is great. A couple different methods on that. You can pull the spring out. We used to use just a 2H pencil, so basically graphite. You can also squirt some Protec in there. Again, part of the problem with a lot of these squeak remedies is that they're not long lasting. So I'm always hesitant to say that the problem is solved, because what happens once the lubrication is gone? So I'm a big proponent, where possible, if you can clean the part first, like if it's a metal part. Metal, just with age, it gets corroded or just gets a little bit of a film on it, and you can feel it, especially on key pins. And I'll show that to you later. If you've ever been cleaning key pins, before and after, you can feel, sometimes just cleaning them, you don't even need lubrication, and you can feel the difference when you take that key on and off the key pin after cleaning it. Like taking them off, they're just sticking to that key pin, but then putting them back on, there's almost no friction just because it slides up and down so nicely just from cleaning.
Or use a metal polish on it.
Yes, and my go-to for that is, a lot of you I'm sure have used this Flitz. It says metal, plastic, and fiberglass. I think I got this at Piano Tech, which is no longer in business, but I'm pretty sure Shaft has this. Or, and again, like Piano Tech, Shaft, those are, if you're a piano technician, for those of you that don't know, they offer wholesale pricing.
One thing about Teflon powder, I really like it too, but I think Brian brought it up in a meeting a while back that you don't want to use that in a player piano because it gets in the solenoids. Is there?
Yeah, a modern player piano.
Yeah.
Not the pneumatic style.
What does it do to them?
I guess it actually coats them and like seizes them up after a while.
Oh,
It's
that's
kind of like putting baking powder in.
Okay, good
Yeah,
tip.
So
Okay, so no Teflon, it's,
Not with the modern player.
thank you, yeah, that makes sense, I never thought of that.
Especially one of these Steinways that has that new player, you find out how much good your insurance is.
Yeah.
Oh, love it.
Yeah.
It's expensive.
I'm sure, yeah. So here we have, I'll just play the video. If you all could hear that.
I heard something.
Like on the damper?
Squeak.
Yeah, that's a squeak, and I'll show you here. I'm just pulling the damper. And if you look in there, that's just the damper lever return spring. What I've done here is just squirted some lubrication in there. And magically the squeak is gone.
That's
And so the reason I'm including this with the pedal is because you can hear that both with the pedal and also with the key. But some pianos, they all squeak, and it can be a very loud. Again, whatever works best. Quickest way, just shoot that whole thing go through with Protec. You could remove all the springs, put a little bit of Teflon in there or pencil. I don't think it would be realistic to try and take those all out and polish all those springs. You could, but again, I'm looking at things here from a field technician perspective. We're in the customer's home. And if some of these things, if they only last 6 months, if you're there tuning the piano every 6 months, it only takes you 5 minutes as opposed to them replacing the whole set of springs. That's just not a realistic repair on a lot of pianos that we service. Financial constraints, or just doesn't make a lot of sense relative to the value of the piano. That being said, I did have a customer with a console that had me replace the entire action, all the components. She just really wanted to keep that piano, and I basically tried to talk her out of it. And I'll probably never do that repair again, but she wanted it done and she was willing to pay for it. So you never know. I think it's in our best interest to be transparent with customers and let them know what's going on. Say, yes, we can fix it. This is what it'll cost. And it's not like you're trying to sell them the job, but it helps them to understand and to show them that you care about their piano. Okay, now we're into some more common.
Oh, the rod that.
The missing belt.
We got a bit of a rattle, and I'll
It's
show you
out,
up
it's
here.
out of the thing. Yeah. Pole, maybe.
Oh, yeah, oh, sorry, now it's in shadow, but I'll just pointed out here. This one was bushed with just the front rail punching. I guess they glued that on there, but over time that hole just enlarged and now the pin is rattling against the damper rod. I'm not a fan of that style of bushing. Here's another rattle. And this one was just completely outright missing bushing. So most likely, I'm guessing that was a rubber bushing, and it probably just disintegrated with age. Just sitting in the bottom of the piano somewhere, and so I guess at this point, I'll show you a few different styles of bushings, and these are all available from Shaft. I like to carry, they're all under $1, and to carry maybe 5 of each of those, that'll get you through a lot of situations. They're different size holes. So rubber, you can also lubricate. You take the damper rod out, clean the pin, and lubricate it, put it back in. The noise will go away, and you can keep the original rubber. That doesn't tend to last. I think the rubber just gets hard. What I wanted to do is show you an alternative method for bushing. This is just an alternative method. This is the little deal here, and again, you can use those rubber bushings that I've passed around, and that's what we had here originally. You can see this style, very common on Yamahas. This is a Hailoon. Kawais use these. Like an old school method was to use some felt. This is a bushing cloth. This is quite thin, and it's just going to depend on the size of your hole.
Key bushing cloth?
This is key bushing cloth. I like to carry an assortment of different sizes. This is the second to the thinnest, and I found that's what fits in this particular hole. So I'm just, sorry, I'm blocking the view here, but I'm just feeding it through here. Of course, easier said than done.
To make it easier on yourself, what you can do is you can cut a angle into the top so it feeds in easier. And if you're doing something really small, you can use a touch of super glue to harden it, so you can just stick that through whatever you're doing, and then you can pull the rest through.
Wow. We're showing toothpick in there.
You can do that too.
Yeah.
Don't say the word
Little point like that.
Dowel.
Micro dowel.
I'll just pull that through. And then, like so. And let's put a piece here. Poke it in there. Take that out so we got a nice, you can see that.
Oh, well, yeah, okay.
And then just put a little, I've left these a little long here, but I'm doing is just put a little one dab there.
Oh, auto power off.
Power off.
No.
No.
No, I love it. No.
Isn't technology wonderful?
Yes.
Damn it.
And basically, there used a little too much glue, and that's the idea. And this is a long-lasting repair, although mind you, even this, a little too much there too. But
Do you have to go back and take care of the rattle from the clothespins?
probably want to take those out.
Oh my gosh.
So there we
You
go.
would say that too.
And then after that, I'll cut that a little bit. But there's your old school bushing.
Oh, that's great.
Nice, and that doesn't get hard like rubber.
I don't think so.
There was a warning you were talking about on those grand pianos. You take out the lock. You should warn people about that with polyester.
Oh,
You shouldn't just chop those out.
okay.
They won't.
Because you'll damage the surrounding polyester.
Right, because they're actually finished with that piece in there.
Okay.
And then you're sanded off. And that's, they sand the finish off, and that's how they make them level. And they're so tight that you'll end up cracking the finish around there, and then that's a big problem to fix that. So,
Yes.
any way to jam it versus trying to take it out.
I've got a question. How many kinds of
lubricant and glue do you carry along with you every day?
I carry all of these. I'll go over these as we go on. So I have one, like a kind of a liquid, and I'll show you what I use these for. Teflon, a spray lubricant. This is a dry spray Teflon type of lubricant. And this is ProTech. And then I have this cleaner stuff. I have a van that the back seats are folded flat, and it's basically loaded. I carry a lot of supplies. Like glue, I carry definitely the Type Bond wood glue, which is great for clicking hammers, and then also crazy glue, like the gel crazy glue with an accelerator, and also a thin viscosity glue. You can do a lot of things with those glues. So where are we here? Okay, so we're moving on from that. This is an interesting one. You hear that sing? So what's happening is that this second damper here is cross copper wire here. It goes down underneath. And this one, as the pedal is being pressed, it's just grazing the bottom of that damper head.
So dumb. Oh,
So
frustrating.
that one I've seen quite often.
Wow.
And there, the solution is basically there's this little screw here. Usually you can just loosen that and move it up just not even a millimeter. If you move it too much, it won't seat in the strings. If you move it just a little bit, or if you really need to, you can take that head right off and just sand the bottom of this. Again, it's the damper head
Wow, that's cool.
that goes down and it's catching on that copper. Did everybody, could you hear that?
Oh, yeah.
A little zing?
Yeah.
Yeah, just a little zing
Yeah.
there.
Wow.
Oh, and here's what I was talking about. Hear that kind of groan? And it's not the pedal itself, but when you press down, it's the whole bottom piece that's flexing. So now I'm pressing on it. So it's somewhere in either the screws underneath, and there again, you can take the offset screwdriver and just go underneath and tighten those up. And some brands, just the bottom board is very flexible for some reason. Probably just not the highest quality plywood that they use or whatever it is.
Wow.
Or I've also, again, in a field situation, I've actually braced the bottom of the piano with little wood blocks and shims. So between the bottom board and the floor, just so the bottom doesn't flex like that. It's an option. So I carry a box of wood, different scraps, different size pieces, and also wood shims. This one I did have the piano on its back. I was doing a different repair, but this was at a customer's home. It's not every day I bring a piano tilter to someone's home, but this particular day I had it. So here I'm just tightening, and here again, they were looser right in the middle there. But while I had it on its back, I went and tightened them all.
Wow.
That's pretty straightforward, I think, just to show you where the screws are.
Were they all a little bit loose at least?
They were all a little bit, yeah.
Is it difficult to tilt that piano on its back by yourself?
No, not really.
Really?
I'd say it's almost more difficult to carry the tilter around than it is to actually tilt the piano.
You have a machine, right, that like does it for you?
It's a foldable metal contraption, basically. It's kind of heavy, but it fits in my van. I don't carry that with me all the time. It's very rare I use that.
Wow.
But
And Chef sells that, right?
Chef carries on.
the shaft carry that.
It's shaped like this, so it just kind of rolls it onto its.
What is it called?
It's a piano tilter. Basically, it's designed so that one person can do it.
Wow.
Really big, tall pianos can be a little bit more difficult, and you have to be careful.
It's about
You don't
$500.
Oh, very
lose the
expensive.
piano
Okay.
in the process that it slides off, but
I
it can be
see.
done.
Okay.
And more noise. Just again, all these points, and here, all these points I'm pointing out here, I like to take that rod out and I like to clean it. I like to use this stuff you have to shake or else it settles. Pass that out too. I like to use that on metal. And then I also like to line the rubber bushings with Teflon. So between those three things, cleaning, the lubrication on the metal, and then lining the rubber with Teflon, that's the longest lasting solution I've found. Here's a very common area for noise on top of that brass, between the brass and the leather there. And again, that if you just clean that and put some Teflon in there, that's very helpful. And this, I'll just point this out while I have it in the frame here, this L bracket thing here,
Yeah.
it's not uncommon for that to rub against the trap work. Or if these are adjusted improperly, it can actually land on that and cause a click. So that usually you can almost just bend it with your hand to get that out of the way. But let's see, all these areas here, let's see if there are any more I can find. Oh, and here's the pin going through the back of the trap work. Again, I tend to squirt Pro-Tech in there, that's a liquid, and I use the little bottles. Okay, this is another interesting, this is now inside a grand piano. That's just kitchen noise there, so.
Yeah,
In a
sounds
customer's
like,
house.
Sounds like pots and pans.
Yeah. But there's a very distinct squeak. And this one, it was a customer complaining about a squeak in the piano. The previous slide, I was showing everything from under the piano. Now I'm basically showing inside the piano. And I'm lubricating the damper lift tray between the damper lift tray felt and the damper lever, just putting some Teflon in there. And again, I like that because you can work it into the felt. And here I'll also point out, here's the pitman.
Yeah.
That's what connects the bottom trap work to the damper tray. Again, this is a grand piano. All potential spots for noise. Some pianos, there's a bushing here that can also cause noise. This one, there's plenty of room, so that's not an issue. Also in upright pianos, there can be a guide that the rod goes through that's bushed with cloth. Basically, anywhere there's friction, lubricate it. After doing all of this, I was still working the pedal. It's also important to work the pedal at different speeds. Fast, slow, coming up slow. So the squeak was still there, and I'm sorry if you can't hear it, but so now I tried squirting using Pro-Tech in a little squirt bottle. That damper tray has little pivot pins that are usually lined with felt. It's another common, and there I'm just brushing Teflon. So again, just being liberal with everything. And I will clean up this Teflon that's landed there, but again, I don't mind if that Teflon even stays there because that's helpful for the keyframe. So what I'm doing here now, and that squeak was still there. So, I don't know if you can hear it there. It's a tiny little, you can hear that. What it ended up, it's this first damper. I could isolate it just by lifting and pressing the pedal, and it went away, but then when I let it down and pressed the pedal, I could hear it again. So I knew it had something to do with that first damper. My initial thought was maybe it was in the guide rail bushing. So I just took the trusty Pro-Tech and was a little too liberal, and you'll see here, I intended to put just a drop down in, but ended up I don't think any harm was done by doing that, just soaking that bushing, and then went back and listened. The squeak still there. So one last thing I did was now I squirted it back in the flange that's holding the damper lever to the back, and I just pretty much squirted it in there. So and you'll see here in a bit. There it's gone.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So after all
Yes.
of that entire process,
My gosh.
I probably spent about an hour by the time I was underneath the piano, lubricating everything, going through the entire, but it's what he was complaining about.
Wow.
And I charged him for it, and he was happy.
Wow. It's a small
Sometimes chasing down these little squeaks and noises. But one other thing I want to point out while I'm on this slide, if I can find a good picture. Yeah, the damper upstop rail, got my laser pointer here, which is, see, here's a screw. There's a piece of wood in behind here that limits the travel of the damper lever. And you can see it's quite low right now, which is fine. If it's too high, what can actually happen is that damper lever could travel too high, especially on a forte blow, and this damper lever will hit the sostenuto knife and cause a very loud clack.
Wow.
And the way you can test that is just from outside the piano is you pull up on the damper and you can hear if it's hitting the sostenuto, which it should never be able to travel that far. So you know your damper upstock rail is too high. And while I was at it here, it's a good idea just to go, while you have it open, to tighten those screws. Just following with the theme of tightening, trying to keep the screws tightened. And I'm sure there are many more things in all of these systems that I'm missing, but pianos are noisy. Here's a good one. Again, this is a brand new Boston Grand. And this one was at a church, and she was complaining about it almost right from the start of when it was delivered. And I'll see if you can see what the problem is. Again, this is the damper tray. That's the pitman. So you can probably see there's excessive lost motion there.
Yeah.
And what was happening, basically if you hit the pedal in a certain way, that was bouncing around in there, causing a bit of a noise. And she pointed it out. Of course, on a grand piano, everything should be quiet and smooth. And it wasn't. The adjustment on that is just from underneath. You just correct the lost motion, and the noise went away. And I billed the dealer for it. That was a service call. It was that, and also the hammer rest rail had come loose. So all the hammers in the base were clacking. And I have a video. I'll show you that here in a second. Noisy shift. And it's a tiny little squeak there. I'm sorry if these aren't coming across
We gotta do it.
all that well. So I got all points in here. I'll show you what I did. This is just the dry lubrication, opposed to a wet lubrication. This one is intended to use it basically on all parts, wood, leather. It says you can even use it on the knuckles if you want. I like to use it on the spots that the glide bolts slide on a grand piano. But you can spray the entire key bed with that. Also, it's not a bad idea to sand a key bed. If it's really rough, some brands, I don't think they ever sanded them coming out of the factory, but they're just rough. And a word of caution, don't just rub your hand across, you'll get a splinter.
Oh my goodness.
But you could start with 120 grit and maybe 220 grit, and then lubricate it. And then also lubricate the glide bolts. This is under the key frame. And here I'm using this McLube. And again, not a bad idea to clean these glide bolts with flits. This was a little tricky to do with one hand with the camera. And just going to keep going here because there's
So is
another.
that this that you were using on?
Yeah. And then there's one other point here, these little pins. It's a good idea to clean and lubricate those because they could squeak in the key end blocks.
Yeah.
And here I'm just rubbing, this is the side, there's a spring. I like to use Teflon powder. Again, I guess there are different things you could use. I'd be curious what they use at the shop here for that. I know graphite used to be a common.
Graphite spray.
Graphite.
Spray.
Oh, spray, okay.
Yeah, you can guard it with cardboard so you don't hit things you don't want to get. You probably don't want to do it in a nice place, but you can just spray a quick little strip, let it dry for a few minutes, and you're good to go.
Is it black?
Mm-hmm.
It is, okay, yeah. And that's a good point. In customers' houses, fumes can be a bit of an issue. This stuff, it smells. I mean, it's chemicals, right? So, and you have to be a little careful this as well.
By the way, he's only spraying the graphite on the spring itself because it's actually tool graphite. It's made for going on metal.
Oh, interesting, okay.
Yeah, so it's on the spring.
Okay.
Not the side of the keyframe.
Okay. So yeah, I would spray the spring with this, but graphite maybe is more appropriate.
It seems to stick.
Seems to stick, yeah.
Yeah, it's called tool mates. It's made for machine work.
Okay.
And so it sticks to the metal.
Why do you have to be careful with the Teflon? You said something about being careful, the fumes of Teflon?
Well, I guess it's more just the idea of having fumes in a customer's house.
Oh, okay.
Like maybe the customer is sensitive to that,
Mm-hmm.
so just something to be aware of. Oh, here's the, thank you. So dry graphite, where do you get this, if you don't mind me asking, is that,
I
We order
don't.
it.
what's that?
We order it.
You order it,
Yeah, we buy by the case. Because we use that for, that's your bridge cap as well.
Oh, bridge
Black
caps,
bridge
yeah.
cap.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also use it for actually duplicating pin blocks. That's what we use
Oh.
for location.
Yeah,
where the high points are.
okay,
So we use a fair amount of it.
nice. And it's long lasting, you find?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a good one. Mark. Anybody guess what's happening there?
Rattling
wire.
damper?
Yeah.
Rattling damper?
The damper wire.
Yes, yes. So it's actually the damper wire that's too close to the string, so when the string vibrates, it's hitting against the wire.
Or if the bushing fell out of the guide rail too.
It could be that, it could be a worn bushing. Also, I think this particular piano, the dampers have been replaced. And it's possible the piano was on its side for an extended period of time, or that they were just very poorly replaced, or that the damper guide rail was in the wrong position. But for whatever reason, they were all leaning to one side. So in this situation, I'm just gonna show you what I ended up doing. And it worked in this situation. It might not work on all situations, but this is just a damper hook. You can get at the damper either from underneath, you have to have the action out to do it from underneath, or you can actually do it from the top, which I just learned from Steve Brady at the PDG convention, which is a real time saver. But in this situation, I press the key up, or the damper lever, so it is completely up. So I know in the up position that the damper is leaning, it's too close to the wire. And then basically, so I'm going to exaggerate it here. So
Oh, yeah.
that's what it was. Obviously now it's jammed, like it wasn't nearly that, now it doesn't even work, it's so bent. But all I had to do in this case was just give it a slight, and again I'm holding it up and just giving it a little bit of a twist and then pluck the string and make sure that there was clearance between the damper wire and the string. But that can be a pain. I've gone through all sorts of different ways of trying to bend that wire. And this I found is just a very simple, just to lift it and then get in there. And again, you could do this from the top even without removing, and just, again, you wouldn't want to do it in a down position. Here's what I want to show Paul.
I'm just mostly good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Take out.
Oh, yeah.
Sole of the shoe.
Oh, my God.
I did have a customer that we spent a long time trying to diagnose, and it was her shoe.
Oh, my gosh.
So,
That's funny.
Oh, man.
and here too, now lyre braces. There are two types of lyre braces. There's the loose dowel type that can be loose. You want to make sure they're both tight and even. You can fill those spaces with, I use cardboard punchings or a piece of leather. And then you also want to make sure these screws are tight. The lyre brace is very common for noise. But also, this part in here can rattle. I don't know if that's supposed to be welded or what, but it can get loose. I'm thinking, and I haven't tried this yet, but potentially you could put some crazy glue in there. Just a thought. So loose, and the whole lyre assembly on a grand piano, the glue joints can all be loose in the lyre itself. I've had it happen sometimes in upright pianos where the damper rod hits the plate. That's unusual, but it can happen. Pedal can hit the floor. Action noise. So here's a good one. So that, I think most of us will recognize that as a loose hammerhead joint.
Oh, Sam.
I was going to show a demonstration, but I'm just going to go past that. One thing I will say about that, I've started using a heat gun to remove the glue joint. It takes about a minute. I like doing it that way because it also softens the glue and it makes it easy to scrape off. So another way to do it is with a clamp and extract that head, which tends to damage the shank a little bit. So I like using a heat gun.
So you do have to remove the head though and re-glue it, right?
Yes, although sometimes if it's a very slight click, I have used a very thin viscosity glue, crazy glue, dropped it in there, hit it with accelerator, and it stops the click. I prefer to actually break that glue joint, clean it up, and put a proper glue collar on there if you can. But here's another.
Last motion?
So there we have the wires interfering. This is on a spinet, so just get in there with your finger, and that you can bend over. So that leather there, or whatever, that faux leather can get hard over time. Here's a good one.
Oh, the back check is the drop wire? Is that?
What was that?
Is the back check in the drop wire? I've had,
On this one here?
yeah.
This one is it's the rubber grommet.
Oh, it's the
actually.
ground of this part, okay.
Yeah.
Because I've seen spins too where the back check, when it comes back, it hits the drop wire.
Oh, that's a good one too, yeah.
The wood against the metal wire.
Yeah.
But it's when you release the key.
Yes, yeah. So if your back check, yeah, it can interfere with
It just
the
hits that drop wire.
Yeah.
Back.
Fixing those things.
So I guess for those of you that haven't been in business for long, these are all fun things you can look forward to.
Oh boy. Yay.
Professional problem solvers.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So here the key is hitting the, I'll just show you here the upstop rail. And a way to test that, if you're putting it back in, if you just put some pressure on that, and if all the hammers are moving, you know it's too close. So you adjust this nut here, and then in this situation, I also put some cardboard punchings on either edge to raise that. And this is an unusual one. So what's happening here is the shank is actually clicking against the spring rail. So in this situation, I'll just show you here. And it's also got grommet noise, but I got rid of the click, and that was on the attack. I just put a piece of my business card in there to shim that rail up back a little bit.
I knew those were good for something.
They're also good for under casters. If they're loose, you can shim them.
You can pull it over.
Yes. Yeah. Here's one I've been playing around with. The dampers are hard, so they're rattling against the screen. So what I did, I took this little round file, and just went in here and very carefully just breaking up the crusty damper. And it helps eliminate a little bit of the noise.
That's so fun.
Another thing you could do with some of the flat felts, you could rub your finger on it, just very carefully. I've had success with that in some instances. I think we all know what that is.
Oh my god.
So,
Pencil? Man.
no,
No.
Loose rail, you have a record.
hammer rest rail, yes.
Is that when the nuts have gotten loose and it's
Yes,
flopping?
yeah, right down in here.
Yeah,
And this, I'll just
Oh my
mention,
gosh.
this is so common. Basically, every time I have a grant action out,
you check.
just take 10 seconds and go through and tighten it. It'll save you a service call. I had an emergency service call on a Sunday afternoon for a concert once because of this. So it's just something to check.
Easy fix.
Very easy fix, yeah, yeah. Oh, here's one I want to show as well. Very quiet, so it's the knuckle. It's a little creak.
Wow.
You can hear it live and better than you can in this video. And here's just a method. Did any of you get the Andre Orbeek, The Voice of the Piano? I think he published it back in 2009 or 10. But this is a method, I saw a class of his once. This is a school board chalk eraser. And so I'm just loading it here with, again, a piece of felt, working it into the eraser, and then just going across. It's very efficient. It's being very liberal with the Teflon, which again, I personally don't mind if a little bit of that falls. But if there's too much, I'll just give it a quick little blow like that. And then they'll clean it up the next time they vacuum the house. So now the squeak is gone.
Ah, that's cool.
That's really fast. way through that.
Yeah,
And that reduces friction too.
definitely, yes, yes.
Easier
It's
to
a little
play.
smoother playing, yeah. And here, I'll just mention, some action noise is inevitable. There's always going to be, you've got moving parts in there. Some actions are just by design a little noisier than others. So one example would be this La Petite Kimball. And I just tuned one today and it was the exact same problem. And I'll see if you can hear all that clicking and clacking. So what it is the jack. There's a button here.
Yeah, I was too.
The adjustment, front to back.
Oh.
It's hard.
Oh,
On every single Kimball La Petite, they all click like that, and then finally narrowed it down to that. And unless you're going to go in there and replace all of those, which I've never done, so that's just again, that's one of those noisy by design faults. Another situation, I had an older Steinway upright, and they've since changed the design, but the back check felt is very thin, and it's very noisy. They make it thicker now. So that's one example. Another example,
would you be able to file those on that button there?
potentially, yeah, that's a good idea, yeah. And that brings up another, I've also had success with knuckles. They get hard.
Mm-hmm.
You can take a brass brush and go through and just lightly brush them. It just raises the fibers a little bit. It gets rid of a bit of noise, but that's a good idea, potentially.
Just thought of it from the lesson.
Yeah, I still, in my mind, I think it's just a hard, thin felt that they used, but brushing it, you could definitely try it.
Yeah.
And then here, I want to show the thumping noise. See, you hear it thumping, the shank is hitting the rest rail. It could be two things: the blow distance is too far, or it's too close to the hammer rest rail. But also, there's just a lot of echo in this particular design. Some pianos, they're just very echoey. So there's just always going to be a little bit of noise there. Key noise, we're moving on, speeding through here. All heard that?
I don't think I've heard that.
You never heard that?
No.
And here's a shimmel. And here I included this particular clip because I wanted to point out on a loud blow you can't hear it,
Yeah.
but if you play softly you can hear it. So this is a Kawai upright, had some squeaking in the keys. So here I'm going through, it's just a cotton cloth, the flits. It takes a bit of time to do this, but if you have the time, if I'm doing a full regulation on a piano, I will definitely do this. Before lubricating, I like to clean all the metal parts. And then I'm taking this McLube, I'm just brushing that up and down. Again, it smells pretty bad, and this is also, it's preventative. Now I'm cleaning the cap stands, doing the same thing. The flits, because that's another potential for noise between the cap stand and the whip and heel felt, I think you call it. Any point there's metal against felt, there's a potential for noise. Hitting it with the McLube. And then as a final, I'm just like going overkill on this one, but I'm taking a little brush and just going in there with some Teflon powder. Again, that works into the felt. So this will be quiet, hopefully for a long time. And again, I like to clean things first because I don't like to rely on the lubrication, because if the lubrication dissipates, then you're still left with a dirty piece if you haven't cleaned the metal. So again, it takes more time, but as a field technician, you're looking for efficient ways to do things. You could go in there delicately with a little brush if you didn't want to waste 10 cents of Teflon, or you could do it way faster and save many dollars of your time and your customer's time. And here I'm going with a brush between the hammer butt leather, which I don't find that to be a common cause of noise, but I guess it does make it smoother. Now we're on to the key frame noise. This is how I like to test if the key frame is knocking. You can hear there's a very pronounced knock there. So what I'm doing, I'm varying the pressure, and you can do this with the key slip on as well, but First you press it down very lightly just so there's contact, and you tap the key, and then you press it down firmly and you tap the key, and then you can hear if that key frame is knocking. And this one had a lot of knocking in it, and just a very quick way, I'm just taking paper punchings and shimming them. So I'm showing you my kit of varying thicknesses, and you're taking up the slack between the key frame and the key bed. And then I'm marking it with chalk just for future reference. What I find too is that this is constantly changing from season to season. In my experience, it's not practical to constantly try to sand that because it'll change in 6 months anyways. Usually it happens around the edges. I find the key frame seems to move up and down. Could be something in the glide bolts, but just the way the whole system works. But this I find to be a very efficient way just to use those punchings and just to slide those in there
So
as
underneath,
needed.
they sit underneath. then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the key frame just slide. They just sit there free,
Oh, okay.
and you can change that from season to season as needed. So just an overview here of some things to look out for as far as key noise. The key stick itself can have splinters. They can rub and cause noise. So there you would just either pull the splinter off or sand it. Loose key tops, very common. Ivories or plastic can get loose. And just when you touch the key, it makes noise. So you just re-glue that. Poor notching. The black key tops can hit the whites. If it's not notched correctly, take the key out, use a file and sand that. White keys hitting the front key slip. Shim the key slip. A lot of common themes here. There I use just, again, cardboard punchings. The back of the black key can hit the fall board, sand that. The keys can be missing bushings. Your key can actually be hitting the neighbor and cause a noise. You can have hard glue in the key bushing itself, right out of the factory, or if it was rebushed carelessly, so you could get in there with a flashlight and look. Loose key leads, quite rare, but it does happen. I won't discuss that now, but it is just a potential. You'd have to re-swedge that, or you could glue the lead. And of course, foreign objects, paper clips, pennies, anything that could fall in between a key. Kids like to, I think, use the keyboard as a slot machine, so you'll find lots of pennies, paper clips, bobby pins. Just go over a string lifting here really quickly. Here's a string tool that I made, string lifting tool. Just to try to get the string can buzz at its termination points. So here I'm just demonstrating, trying to just lightly massage that string in an upward motion while pulling back on that tool. And then I'm also going to the back and slightly tapping with a hammer shank, very slightly. I'm not hitting it, it's just a very minor tap. And you can actually see the string move a tiny bit. You have to be careful that you're not actually crushing the bridge fibers. But, that can help eliminate a little bit of noise. You can also use a string hook and massage the string sideways against the bridge pin to get a little bit of a better termination. Loose bridge pins can also cause a rattle. You can tap that in with a nail, a set. If it's cracked, you can pull the pin and put some glue in there. All things I've done in customers' houses, again, as a field technician. Here's a hear that buzz in there. A couple of things can cause that. It's basically, there's a little bit of a rattle in there. There's one solution, is to mute that off. The problem with that is that you can kill a note. It deadens it. It does get rid of the sound, but you do need a little bit of that. A lot of that's caused by indentations on V-bar. Over time, it can cut into that. You can lift the strings on both sides of the V-bar with that hook. You can also mate the hammer to the strings. That could get rid of a lot of V-bar noise, or at least minimize it. And then as a last case scenario, I have had situations where I've gone through an entire section and just muted it off at the customer's request because it was really bothering them. Again, it can kill the tone, but it's a possible solution. So can anybody guess this one here?
Yeah, this foil.
Yeah, it's a loose copper separate winding. Here's another one. This one is less pronounced. It's on that second bi-chord, the right string. You hear a bit of a zing in there. The left string's clean. You hear that metallic rattle. This was a Boston Grand. Ideally, you replace the string, but before you do that, what you can do is loosen that wire about a half a turn. Don't go any more than half a turn because you could break the string. Take the string off, twist it in the direction of the coil. I won't go into detail about that now, but if you go the wrong direction, you'll actually loosen it, potentially make it worse. Half a turn or a maximum of 1 turn, put it back on, pull it up to pitch. I have had limited success with that. Problem with that is you destabilize the tuning, for one thing. You also risk breaking the string, but if you're going to potentially replace it anyway, you might want to try that first. Here's something else to look out for. If you can see, this is an upright piano. There's a little piece in here. This was actually a little bug of some sort falling in there. It was trapped between the string and the bridge. You'll also find splinters down there that can fall in there. So you remove that. It's something to look out for. At first, I didn't know what it was. I was looking all around the top. Here's another example of a string. This is the speaking length here. The string was actually catching on the notching of the neighboring string on the bridge. Just poor notching. This was a 7-foot Kimball from the 80s. So I just got my chisel in there and just hacked away at it. It wasn't pretty, but it at least solved the noise. Soundboard buzzes, I'm just going to go over quickly. As a field technician, there's not a lot that we can do. There are a few things. I'm just going to demonstrate here. This is a Steinway console, an old one. So there's something flapping around in that soundboard, typically caused by a split and then a vibration between the soundboard and the rib. You could theoretically put a screw through there and put some glue in there to try and tighten it. In my 25 years, I've maybe done that less than a handful of times at a customer's house. It's possible, but again, transparency with the customer, let them know what's going on. A couple other things you could look for as far as soundboard goes. Sometimes around the edges, there can be excess glue that's squished out. I had a Kawhi Grand that had, in the treble section, it was just sloppy glue and it would dry and harden. And I scraped that off and a lot of the noise went away, not all of it, but it at least got rid of some of it. Splinters, where the nose bolt goes through the soundboard that the plate rests on, but that goes through the soundboard. For sure, if that's touching the soundboard, that's rare. Any kind of splinter on the rib notching against the soundboard. Basically, you're being a detective. You're having the customer play the piano. You're touching different spots. And a tip I got from David Reed, again from Kawhi, it's the spot that takes the least pressure. That's where your source is. If you have to push on it really hard, there's a bigger gap somewhere. But if you just touch it and the noise goes away, you're really zeroing in on the spot. Just a tip there. Okay, bench noise. So that's Glenn Gould, for those of you that don't know, the famous noisy piano bench that recording engineers did not like, but Glenn Gould didn't seem to mind it. So just basically don't neglect benches. They're just very noisy. This is an artist bench with a mechanism underneath. And I'm just showing you here all the ways it knocks around, it's loose. But all the legs, just take a few minutes, go through and tighten those bolts, hinges. Again, as we discussed earlier, all the hinges, potentials for noise, miscellaneous noise. I have plate resonance. I was basically trying to think of all the noises that I've ever heard. And this I have not heard in the last 6 months. In fact, this I've probably only ever heard a handful of times. I know one specific time on a Steinway, it was a 70s vintage Steinway B, so a 7-foot Grand. There was a very distinct plate resonance. It's been described, I think Mario Egret describes it as a gong type sound. It's almost like you're taking a tennis ball and throwing it against the plate, and it's an echo on certain notes. And I've since heard it's apparently common on some Steinways. There's a plate strut in there that can cause that. I don't know that there are any solutions, but that's a very unusual noise. Key takeaways. Back to basics here. Remove objects from the top of the piano and surrounding areas. Listen to the piano before and after taking the case apart. Clean the interior. Tighten all screws. Clean and lubricate all action components. Thoroughly inspect the entire pedal system. Check for any loose parts, worn or missing parts. And again, circle of refinement. If you're tuning a piano once a year for 20 years, you have plenty of time to address these one at a time. The customer may or may not notice these or even bring them up to you, which is kind of my last point here. Be a little careful about what you point out to the customer. They may not even notice. As a piano tuner, we're very attuned to these things. And sometimes, in my experience, it's more important to me than it is to the customer. And if you point it out to the customer and they haven't noticed it, you might be opening up a can of worms. But for your own sense of gratification, these are all potential things that you can improve the piano. And you can create that backdrop of silence that really lets the tone come through. Because all of these noises, they're really just obscuring the tone of the piano, which is what we're really listening for. So in conclusion, I would just point out noise reduction is a major component of complete piano service. It's not secondary. Quite often gets overlooked. It's not as exciting maybe as tuning or regulation or voicing or rebuilding, but it is a critical component. And then the last one here, we do need to be customer oriented as technicians, and this symbolizes the customer signing the check. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much.